Los Angeles, California, August 19, 2025. The Angeles National Forest stretches for miles. Rugged mountains, steep canyons, and forests so thick they can swallow anything. That afternoon, hikers came across something they would never forget. Hidden beneath pine needles and dirt, wrapped in tarps and duct tape, was the body of a young woman. Her name was Sheylla Cabrera, only 29 years old, a mother, a friend, a woman whose disappearance had already consumed her family with fear. The most chilling detail wasn't where she was found. It was how she got there. Because just days before, security cameras at her home captured her husband dragging a large, heavy bundle into the night. Sheylla wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She was an ordinary woman with extraordinary dreams. Born in Los Angeles to immigrant parents, she was described as loving, hardworking, and fiercely protective of her children. Her friends say she loved to laugh, loved to dance, and above all, she loved being a mother. She was the kind of mom, one neighbor later recalled, who always had snacks packed, who always had a plan for the weekend. You could see how much she adored her kids. But behind the smiles and family photos, there were cracks forming in her marriage. Sheylla had been married for several years. On the outside, they looked like any other couple: 2 kids, a suburban home, weekend cookouts. But those close to Sheylla whispered about tension, fights behind closed doors, the kind of arguments neighbors could hear through thin walls. She confided to a friend that things weren't right, that she felt trapped, that her husband was growing more controlling. In the weeks before her disappearance, Sheylla had even talked about leaving, about starting fresh with her children, but she never got the chance. In early August 2025, Sheylla suddenly vanished. Calls went unanswered. Her mother couldn't reach her. Friends knocked on her door and got no reply. Her husband gave vague explanations. She left, she needed space, she'd be back. But her family didn't believe him. Sheylla loved her children too much to just walk away. Days turned into a week. And then came the footage. Investigators, searching for answers, pulled security camera recordings from the couple's home. What they saw turned the case upside down. In grainy black and white, late at night, Sheylla's husband struggled out of the house. He dragged a large, heavy bundle across the driveway. The shape was long, awkward, wrapped in plastic. He loaded it into his vehicle, glancing around nervously, unaware that the cameras were watching. When police later showed the footage to Sheylla's family, their worst fears were confirmed. Something terrible had happened. Authorities launched a search across Los Angeles County. Helicopters scanned forests. Ground teams searched canyons. Flyers with Sheylla's smiling face went up across the city. But deep down, her family already knew. They feared Sheylla wasn't coming back alive. And just as the investigation closed, in another twist exploded. Her husband vanished too, fleeing the United States, taking their children with him. The discovery of Sheylla's body in the Angeles National Forest would answer one question, but it would unleash a dozen more. Who exactly was her husband? Why did he run? And most haunting, what really happened inside that house before the cameras caught him in the night? The tragedy of Sheylla Cabrera was only just beginning to unfold. At first glance, the Cabrera household looked ordinary. A husband, a wife, 2 young children, and a suburban home in Los Angeles County. Neighbors waved when they drove by. The kids played in the yard. Barbecues and birthday parties filled there. Weekends. To outsiders, it looked like stability, like love. But behind closed doors, the reality was much darker. Friends later recalled moments when Sheylla would show up at gatherings looking tired, withdrawn as if she hadn't slept. She brushed off concerns, laughing, saying, "It's just the stress of kids, you know how it is." But sometimes her words betrayed her mask. She confided to a close friend that her husband's temper was unpredictable, that small disagreements could spiral into nights of yelling, and sometimes silence. The kind of cold silence that lingers longer than words. She was scared, one friend admitted. But she tried to hide it. She didn't want people to see her marriage falling apart. Slowly, those closest to her noticed something. Sheylla had less freedom. She rarely went out without her husband. She answered fewer calls. Sometimes she would text back hours later with excuses. "Sorry, I was busy," or "he needed me." Her social media grew quiet. The vibrant woman who once posted photos of her kids at the park, family trips, little celebrations, suddenly, she was almost silent. It was as if her world was shrinking. Just weeks before her disappearance, Sheylla told her sister something chilling. "I don't think he'll ever let me leave, not with the kids." Her words carried fear, but also determination. She wanted to start fresh, to give her children a life free of shouting, free of walking on eggshells. But as she spoke those words, her sister noticed something in her voice. Desperation. In the days leading up to August, neighbors began noticing strange things. One recalled hearing loud arguments echoing late into the night. Another noticed Sheylla's car hadn't moved for days. A third swore they saw her husband outside, pacing, looking anxious. When Sheylla suddenly vanished, those same neighbors became the first to speak up. She would never just leave her babies. Something happened in that house. When questioned, Sheylla's husband gave inconsistent answers. To some, he said she had needed space. To others, he claimed she'd gone to visit a friend. But when police pressed him for details, his story shifted. He grew defensive, irritated, evasive. He seemed less concerned about finding his wife, and more worried about investigators prying into his life. Meanwhile, Sheylla's family was frantic. Her mother left dozens of voicemails, begging her daughter to call back. Her siblings posted appeals online, pleading for the public's help. Her children, too young to understand, asked for their mother. Their voices, innocent and confused, became unbearable for relatives to hear. Sheylla was their everything, her aunt later said. And she wouldn't abandon them. "We knew something terrible had happened." By the second week of her disappearance, the tension was undeniable. Police hadn't declared foul play, but the community sensed it. The arguments, the secrecy, the sudden silence. And then came the surveillance footage. Grainy, haunting, damning. A man dragging a bundle into the night. Everything people suspected suddenly had proof. The camera footage was the crack that split the case wide open. But it wasn't just evidence, it was a window into a chilling truth. Because if Sheylla's husband was responsible, then the question wasn't just where she was. It was, how long had the plan been in motion? And just how far would he go to cover his tracks? It was the first week of August, 2025. The Cabrera home looked quiet from the outside. Lights glowing faintly through curtains. The hum of a television flickering in the living room. But inside, tension hung like a storm. Neighbors later recalled hearing raised voices. Not just a normal argument, something sharper, heavier. A woman's voice cracking with anger, and a man's voice cutting through, low and forceful. And then silence. By morning, Sheylla was gone. No texts, no calls. No update on social media. For a woman so devoted to her children, it was unthinkable. Her husband told anyone who asked that she had left to clear her head, that she needed time. But when family tried to contact her, phones went unanswered. Her closest friends knew instantly this wasn't Sheylla. She would never leave her babies. One said through tears, "Never." Her family filed a missing persons report. Deputies came to the house, asking questions, taking notes. Her husband repeated his story. She left. She just left, but his body language told another story. Arms crossed, eyes darting. No urgency, no fear. Detectives felt the unease. Something wasn't right. A week into the search, investigators turned to an unlikely witness: the security cameras mounted around the Cabrera home. For hours, they reviewed grainy footage, cars passing by, porch lights flickering, ordinary life. And then, just after midnight on the night Sheylla vanished, the footage shifted. The front door opened. A man, Sheylla's husband, appeared. He was dragging something heavy, wrapped in tarp. Awkward in shape, long, he struggled with the weight, pausing, looking over his shoulder as if to make sure no one was watching. He dragged the bundle across the driveway and toward his vehicle. Even in the poor resolution, investigators could see the strain in his arms, the effort, the secrecy. When police showed the footage to Sheylla's family, the room fell silent. Her mother broke down sobbing. Her sister screamed, begging to turn it off. It wasn't proof beyond doubt, but to them, it was confirmation of what they had feared. Sheylla was not missing. Sheylla was gone. With the footage in hand, detectives launched a full-scale search. Helicopters swept over Angeles National Forest. Search dogs combed through trails. Deputies scoured backroads, fields, rivers. But Los Angeles County is vast. Thousands of acres of wilderness. Endless places to hide the truth. And while police searched, the man at the center of it all grew increasingly elusive. Just as investigators began to close in, Sheylla's husband vanished. Neighbors noticed his car was gone. Family couldn't reach him. His phone went dark. Within days, it was confirmed. He had fled the country, boarded a plane with his children, escaped to Peru. While Sheylla's body remained hidden in the wilderness, the prime suspect in her disappearance was already half a world away. For the investigators left behind, the case took on a darker tone. It was no longer just a missing person. It was a homicide. And the footage, frozen on their screens, played like a haunting ghost. A man dragging a secret into the night. The search for Sheylla Cabrera's body would stretch across weeks, consuming her family with grief and the community with fear. But when she was finally found, deep in the Angeles National Forest, the discovery raised even more questions. How long had she been there? And why did the man who promised to love her flee with their children instead of fight for her? The haunting answers would soon be unearthed. For weeks, the Cabrera family lived in limbo. Flyers with Sheylla's smiling face plastered telephone poles. Social media filled with pleas. Have you seen her? Candlelight vigils glowed in the evenings, voices breaking in prayer. But behind the hope was dread. Detectives believed the security footage had told the story. They weren't searching for a missing woman anymore. They were searching for a body. The question was where? If Los Angeles is a city of lights, then the Angeles National Forest is its shadow. Nearly 700,000 acres of mountains and ravines. Remote, rugged, beautiful, and terrifying. Detectives suspected it was the perfect place to hide something. Search teams combed the forest, methodically covering trailheads and canyons. Helicopters hovered low, their spotlights piercing treetops. But the forest swallowed sound and light, holding its secrets close. Days turned into weeks. Still nothing. On the morning of August 19, 2025, it wasn't police who found her. It was hikers. They had strayed off trail, following a small clearing near a ravine. That's when they saw it. A corner of tarp, torn loose from soil and pine needles. The smell was unmistakable. When deputies arrived, they carefully pulled back layers of duct tape and plastic. Beneath was the body of 29-year-old Sheylla Cabrera. The silence in that forest was suffocating. Deputies stood in disbelief. Hardened investigators looked away, some wiping their eyes. The discovery spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed across California: body of missing mother found in Angeles National Forest. Husband missing, believed to have fled to Peru. For her family, the news was shattering. Her mother collapsed when told. Her siblings wept in each other's arms. and her children too young to understand to ask questions that no one knew how to answer. Reports later revealed Sheylla had been carefully wrapped, almost ritualistically. It wasn't a panic disposal, it was deliberate, planned. Detectives theorized the killer had carried her into the forest late at night, choosing a spot far enough off-trail to avoid hikers, but close enough to reach by vehicle. It showed forethought, calculation, and to police, it confirmed what they feared. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. Even as her body was pulled from the earth, the man accused of killing her was beyond their reach. Her husband was already in Peru, living freely, raising the same children Sheylla had once sworn to protect. The international divide turned the case into something bigger. Extradition battles, legal hurdles, diplomatic silence, and meanwhile, the Cabrera family buried their daughter without answers. At the site where Sheylla was found, strangers left flowers, some lit candles at the forest's edge. For many, her story was unbearable because it was familiar. Another young mother, silenced in the shadows of domestic violence, her name became a rallying cry. Advocates called for stronger protections. Friends vowed to keep her story alive. She deserved better, her sister said at a vigil. She deserved life. She deserved to raise her babies. The forest had given back Sheylla's body, but it hadn't given back the truth. Why did her husband run? What really happened inside that house before she disappeared? And would justice ever reach across borders to hold him accountable? The answers would prove as haunting as the tragedy itself. Even as deputies searched the forest, Sheylla's husband was already gone. Neighbors noticed his car vanish overnight. Calls went unanswered. His phone went dark. By the time investigators pieced it together, it was too late. He had boarded a flight to Peru with the couple's 2 children. To her family, it was the ultimate betrayal. He hadn't just taken Sheylla's life, he had stolen her children, her legacy, her future. Her mother's voice trembled in interviews. We lost Sheylla, and now we've lost her babies too. How much more are we supposed to endure? Her siblings described nights without sleep, haunted by images of the forest, of the tarp, of the children calling for a mother who would never return. The grief was unbearable. But the rage that burned even stronger. Authorities in California prepared charges. But jurisdiction ended at the border. Extradition was complicated. Peru does not always hand over its citizens easily. Legal loopholes, delays, political maneuvering. Suddenly justice felt like a distant dream. The man accused of murdering Sheylla lived freely abroad, while her family lit candles over her grave. For many, the tragedy deepened when they thought of Sheylla's children. Too young to understand, whisked into another country, raised by the man believed to have killed their mother. Child advocates called it unthinkable. Commentators asked, what kind of system lets this happen? Each photo of the smiling toddlers cut deeper into the public's heart. They were innocent, caught in a web of violence and lies. Across Los Angeles, vigils grew louder. Protesters demanded justice. Social media flooded with hashtags. Hashtag justice for Sheylla, a hashtag bring him back. True crime forums lit up with debates. Some dissected the evidence. Others shared anger at the broken system. Many simply mourned strangers united in outrage. Meanwhile, U.S. Marshals and Interpol quietly coordinated. His name was added to international watch lists. Alerts were sent across borders, but Peru was his shield. He blended into new streets, new routines, living a life as if nothing had happened, while California wept for Sheylla. For the Cabrera family, life split in two. Before August 2025 and after. Every holiday, an empty chair at the table. Every birthday, candles lit for remembrance instead of celebration. Her sister said through tears, Sheylla deserved love. She deserved safety. And instead, she got a grave in the forest. But even as grief consumed her family, whispers of hope remained. Investigators refused to let her case die. Advocates carried her name. And around the world, people demanded accountability. The story of Sheylla Cabrera wasn't just a tragedy, it was a test of justice itself. Would a killer go free simply because of a border? Or would the world finally deliver justice for a young mother silenced too soon? In the weeks after Sheylla's body was found, her family struggled with an impossible truth. Her mother visited the gravesite daily, leaving fresh flowers and whispering prayers. Her siblings replayed the security footage over and over, asking themselves, why didn't we see the signs? Could we have saved her? But the hardest part wasn't just the loss. It was knowing her children were thousands of miles away, living with the man suspected of taking her life. California prosecutors filed charges of murder, tampering with evidence, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. U.S. Marshals worked with Interpol to issue alerts, but extradition from Peru was not simple. Legal battles stretched on, slowed by bureaucracy and politics. Months passed. Then years. Her family waited and waited. Justice delayed, her sister said. Feels like justice denied. As the legal fight dragged, Sheylla's name began appearing in headlines across America, not just as a victim, but as a symbol. Advocates for domestic violence victims used her case to demand reform. Candlelight vigils turned into rallies. Her story spread beyond California, reaching women who saw themselves in her silence, her fear, her desperate plans to leave. She was trying to escape, one advocate said. But the system didn't protect her, and now we're here, asking why. Each year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, her family and supporters gather at the Angeles National Forest. They light candles. They leave flowers. They speak her name out loud, refusing to let it fade into silence. At one vigil, a family friend whispered, Sheylla lives on in her children, and one day they will learn the truth. This is perhaps the most haunting part of all. Two innocent children, too young to remember what happened, growing up with the man accused of destroying their family. Will they ever know the truth? Will they ever see justice for their mother? These questions linger, unanswered, like ghosts. The forest where she was found has returned to quiet. Birds sing, leaves rustle. But for those who know, it will never be the same. Because somewhere between the trees and shadows, Sheylla's story still echoes. A story of love. A story of betrayal. A story of a young mother whose light was stolen, but whose name continues to burn bright. Sheylla Cabrera was 29 years old. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and most of all, a mother who deserved so much more. Her story is not just about how she died, it is about how she lived. And it is about the justice that still waits in silence, until her case is resolved. Until accountability is delivered, her name will remain a haunting reminder. Silence can be deadly, and justice must never stop at a border.